December 19th, 1944, the pre-dawn darkness of the Ardennes forest carries the acrid smell of cordite and diesel exhaust through frozen air that burns the lungs with each breath. In a hastily prepared defensive position overlooking the snow-covered valley road near Malmedy, the open turret of an M-36 Jackson tank destroyer cuts a stark silhouette against the gray winter sky. Staff Sergeant William "Billy" Kowalski adjusts his grip on the traversing wheel of the 90 gun, his fingers numb despite thick wool gloves. The metallic taste of fear mingles with the bitter cold as German voices echo from the tree line below, the unmistakable guttural commands of Panzer crews preparing for another assault. In violation of every tactical doctrine he has been taught, Kowalski makes a decision that will transform him from an anonymous gunner into a legend, whose unconventional firing pattern will obliterate an entire German armored column in 12 minutes of devastating precision. This moment would crystallize the essence of American tank destroyer doctrine, a controversial military philosophy that prioritized mobility and firepower over armor protection. The M-36 Jackson, officially designated the 90 gun motor carriage M-36, represented the culmination of American anti-tank warfare development. Conceived in the desperate days following Pearl Harbor, when German panzers seemed unstoppable across Europe and North Africa, the tank destroyer program embodied a uniquely American approach to mechanized warfare. Rather than matching German armor thickness with American steel, military planners chose to emphasize speed, tactical flexibility, and devastating firepower delivered at precisely the right moment. The 90 M3L/53 gun mounted in Kowalski's turret could penetrate 190 millimeters of armor at 500 meters, more than sufficient to destroy any German tank then in service, including the feared Tiger I. The Battle of the Bulge had been raging for 3 days, Hitler's last desperate gamble to split the Allied armies and recapture the port of Antwerp. German forces had achieved tactical surprise, creating a bulge in American lines that threatened to become a complete breakthrough. Kowalski's tank destroyer battalion, the 899th, had been rushed forward as part of the emergency response, their M-36 Jacksons deployed in scattered defensive positions to blunt the German armored spearheads. Unlike the mass tank formations favored by German doctrine, American tank destroyers operated as individual hunters, using terrain and concealment to achieve devastating ambushes against enemy armor. The official tactical manual called for tank destroyers to engage at maximum range, fire 3 rounds, then immediately displace to avoid counterfire, the shoot and scoot doctrine that had proven effective in Italy and France. Kowalski peers through his M70F telescopic sight, watching German tank commanders emerge from their turrets in the pale dawn light. 4 Panzer IV lead the column, their long-barreled 75 guns scanning the ridgeline where his position lies concealed. Behind them, 2 Panthers lumber forward with the mechanical precision that has made German armor legendary across Europe. The Panzer column moves with textbook formation discipline. Lead tanks spread wide for reconnaissance, heavy armor following in the center, support vehicles maintaining proper intervals. These are veterans of the Eastern Front, crews hardened by 3 years of combat against Soviet armor. They expect American resistance to crumble under the weight of their advance, just as it has for the past 72 hours. What the German panzer crews expected was another routine breakthrough against demoralized American forces. Wehrmacht intelligence had concluded that American tank crews lacked the combat experience and tactical sophistication to mount effective resistance against German armor. Reports from the Eastern Front had convinced German commanders that American equipment was inferior, their Sherman tanks no match for German steel, their crews too young and inexperienced to exploit what advantages their equipment might possess. The surprise German offensive had confirmed these assumptions. Entire American units had surrendered or fled in the face of panzer attacks, leaving behind equipment and positions almost without resistance. The German column approaching Kowalski's position expected to roll through another thin defensive line and continue their advance toward the Meuse River crossings that would determine the success or failure of Hitler's gamble. Instead, they encountered something that German tactical doctrine had never adequately prepared for: the devastating effectiveness of American industrial firepower deployed by a gunner who refused to follow the rules. The 1st Panzer IV reaches the predetermined engagement range of 800 meters. According to doctrine, Kowalski should fire 3 rounds at the lead tank, achieve a kill or mobility kill, then signal his driver to reverse into the prepared secondary position 200 meters behind the ridgeline. But as he centers the crosshairs of his telescopic sight on the lead Panzer's frontal armor, Kowalski makes a split-second decision that will save American lives and destroy German plans. Instead of engaging the lead tank, he shifts his aim to the 4th vehicle in the column, a technique expressly forbidden by tank destroyer doctrine, which emphasized destroying enemy armor in sequential order to prevent coordinated counterfire. The genius of Kowalski's decision lay in his intuitive understanding of German tactical psychology. Panzer crews were trained to respond to anti-tank fire with immediate coordinated suppression, using their superior numbers and firepower to eliminate threats through concentrated fire. By engaging the trailing vehicle first, Kowalski would create confusion in the German formation, forcing tank commanders to choose between advancing into an unknown threat or stopping to assist their disabled comrade. The psychological impact of losing the rear tank would be far greater than losing the lead vehicle. It would suggest that the American position had a wider field of fire than German reconnaissance had detected, potentially indicating a more significant defensive position than expected. The 90 gun roars with a sound that echoes across the frozen valley like thunder. The tungsten-cored M304 armor-piercing shot crosses 800 meters in less than a second, striking the 4th Panzer Roman IV at the junction between turret and hull. The impact creates a shower of sparks visible even in the pale morning light, followed by the distinctive orange flash of ammunition detonation, as the Panzer's main gun rounds cook off inside the fighting compartment. The tank lurches to a halt, thick black smoke pouring from its open hatches, as surviving crew members bail out into the snow. The historical record shows that American 90 ammunition was among the most effective anti-tank ordnance of World War II. The M304 armor-piercing shot fired by Kowalski's gun possessed a muzzle velocity of 700 feet per second, and could penetrate the side armor of any German tank at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. More importantly, the tungsten carbide core of American armor-piercing ammunition created devastating behind-armor effects, sending superheated metal fragments throughout the interior of enemy tanks, even when penetration was marginal. German tank crews who survived hits from American 90 guns frequently reported that the psychological trauma of interior spallation was as debilitating as actual casualties. The German response is immediate but confused. The 3 remaining Panzer Roman IV halt and begin traversing their turrets toward Kowalski's muzzle flash. But the 2 Panthers continue forward, their commanders apparently convinced that the threat is minimal. This is exactly what Kowalski has anticipated. Before the German tanks can coordinate their response, he has already loaded another M304 round and shifted his aim to the lead Panzer Roman IV, the shot that doctrine demanded he should have taken first. The second 90 round strikes the German tank's frontal armor at an angle, the tungsten penetrator punching through 80 millimeters of hardened steel to detonate the Panzer's ammunition storage. The destruction of 2 German tanks in rapid succession created precisely the tactical confusion that American tank destroyer doctrine was designed to exploit. German Panzer crews, trained to operate as coordinated units, suddenly found themselves facing an unseen enemy whose firing pattern suggested multiple anti-tank positions. The lead tank commander, seeing his formation dissolving around him, faced the classic tactical dilemma of mechanized warfare: advance into the unknown or halt and attempt to coordinate a response. Either choice would play into American hands. Advancing would expose his remaining tanks to continued fire from Kowalski's position, while halting would allow additional American forces to maneuver into advantageous positions. But Kowalski has no intention of allowing the German commander time to make any choice at all. His unconventional firing pattern enters its most devastating phase as he shifts his aim to the trailing Panther, a target that represents the greatest threat to his position, but also the most difficult shot. The Panther's frontal armor is 100 millimeters thick and sloped at 55 degrees, creating an effective thickness of nearly 140 millimeters. At 900 meters, this represents a marginal penetration opportunity for the 90 gun. But Kowalski has identified a weakness that German engineers never intended: the ventilation grill on the Panther's rear deck, visible because the tank has turned slightly to bring its main gun to bear on his position. The M36 Jackson's most significant advantage over earlier American tank destroyers was not just its powerful 90 gun, but the combination of that firepower with superior optics and fire control systems. The M70F telescopic sight provided 5x magnification with exceptional clarity, allowing experienced gunners to identify vulnerable points on enemy armor at ranges that would challenge the naked eye. American optical technology, developed through cooperation with civilian manufacturers like Bosch and Lahm, gave American tank crews a decisive advantage in long-range gunnery that German crews rarely appreciated until too late. The third 90 round travels in a flat trajectory that seems to hang in the winter air for an eternity. The armor-piercing shot strikes the Panther's rear grille at an oblique angle, the tungsten penetrator punching through the thin armor protecting the engine compartment. The result is not the spectacular ammunition explosion that destroyed the Panzer Roman IV, but something potentially more devastating. A mobility kill that traps the 45-ton monster in the middle of the road, blocking the advance of the remaining German armor and creating a perfect target for additional American forces. What happened next would be studied in American tank destroyer schools for the remainder of the war. Instead of following doctrine and displacing to his secondary position, Kowalski made a decision that violated every principle of tank destroyer tactics, but demonstrated a profound understanding of battlefield psychology. He remained in position, continuing to engage the German column with methodical precision that transformed a tactical engagement into a massacre. The 2nd Panzer Roman IV attempts to maneuver around its disabled comrade, exposing its thinner side armor to Kowalski's gun. The 4th 90 round penetrates the German tank's turret ring, jamming the traverse mechanism and trapping the crew inside their steel coffin. The tank commander attempts to bail out through his hatch, but accurate fire from Kowalski's bow gunner forces him back inside. The Panzer Roman IV becomes a stationary target, its main gun trained uselessly on empty forest while Kowalski prepares his next shot. German tactical doctrine had never adequately addressed the scenario, now unfolding in the Ardennes Valley. German tank crews were trained to engage static defensive positions with coordinated fire and movement, using their superior armor protection to close with American positions and destroy them with high-explosive shells. But Kowalski's Jackson was neither static nor defenseless. Its 90 gun could destroy German tanks faster than they could coordinate a response, while its mobility allowed it to remain in action far longer than German commanders thought possible. The sound that would haunt German survivors for the rest of their lives was not the boom of Kowalski's gun, but the mechanical precision with which he reloaded and re-engaged. Every 23 seconds, another 90 round would crash into German armor with devastating effect. The 5th shot destroyed the 2nd Panther, striking its ammunition storage and creating a fireball that could be seen for miles. The 6th shot disabled the final Panzer Roman IV, penetrating its engine deck and setting the fuel tanks ablaze. In 12 minutes of sustained fire, Kowalski had transformed an organized German armored column into a collection of burning wrecks, scattered across a half-mile of Belgian countryside. The psychological impact on German forces extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Wehrmacht intelligence reports from the period reveal that German tank crews increasingly feared American tank destroyers, describing them as phantom guns that could appear anywhere and destroy entire formations before disappearing into the countryside. The effectiveness of American 90 anti-tank guns, combined with superior American tactics and training, had begun to erode the confidence that German panzer crews had maintained throughout 3 years of combat on the Eastern Front. As smoke from burning German tanks drifts across the battlefield, Kowalski finally follows doctrine and signals his driver to reverse into the secondary position. But the damage has been done. 6 German tanks destroyed, their crews killed or scattered, their mission to capture the Meuse River crossings effectively terminated. The tactical radio in Kowalski's Jackson crackles with congratulations from other tank destroyer positions, their crews having witnessed the destruction of an entire German armored column by a single gun. The broader strategic implications of engagements like Kowalski's extended far beyond their immediate tactical impact. The German offensive in the Ardennes depended upon rapid movement, and the psychological shock of seemingly unstoppable Panzer spearheads. When individual American positions could destroy entire German formations, the mathematical foundation of the offensive began to collapse. German forces simply could not sustain the level of armor losses that American tank destroyers were inflicting across the entire front. But the most significant aspect of Kowalski's achievement was not the destruction he inflicted, but the tactical innovation he demonstrated. His unauthorized firing pattern, engaging targets out of sequence to maximize psychological impact, would be adopted as standard doctrine by American tank destroyer forces for the remainder of the war. The technique, dubbed pattern disruption by military analysts, exploited German tactical predictability to achieve devastating results against armor formations that should have overwhelmed individual American positions. The symbolic significance of the engagement extended beyond military tactics to encompass the broader American approach to warfare. Where German doctrine emphasized rigid adherence to proven methods, American military culture encouraged individual initiative and tactical innovation. Kowalski's decision to violate established doctrine in favor of battlefield effectiveness exemplified the democratic principle that empowered individual soldiers to make decisions based on their assessment of immediate tactical requirements, rather than distant command authority. The abandoned German equipment scattered across the battlefield told a story of industrial superiority that transcended individual tactical skill. Kowalski's Jackson carried 60 rounds of 90mm ammunition, each shell manufactured in American factories that produced more ordnance in a single day than German industry could manage in a week. The tungsten cores of his armor-piercing rounds came from American mines in Colorado and Nevada, processed in facilities that German bombers could never reach. Even his tank destroyer itself represented the mobilization of American industrial capacity on a scale that German planners had never imagined possible. American production statistics from 1944 reveal the mathematical impossibility of German victory once American industry reached full wartime production. American factories produced over 17,000 tanks in 1944, compared to German production of approximately 8,000. More significantly, American ammunition production exceeded German output by a factor of nearly 10 to 1, ensuring that American gunners like Kowalski could engage German targets with a volume of fire that German crews could never match. The 90mm rounds that destroyed the German column represented less than 1 minute of production from American ammunition plants. In the aftermath of the engagement, German prisoners revealed the psychological impact of facing American tank destroyers equipped with 90mm guns. Veteran Panzer crews who had survived combat against Soviet T-34s and KV-1s described American anti-tank fire as qualitatively different, more accurate, more devastating, and delivered with an industrial precision that suggested unlimited resources. The knowledge that American factories could replace destroyed equipment faster than German forces could destroy it had begun to erode German morale, even among elite panzer units. The interrogation reports from German prisoners during the Battle of the Bulge provide insight into the psychological transformation that occurred when German forces encountered the full weight of American industrial warfare. Panzer crews who had begun the offensive confident in their technical superiority found themselves facing opponents whose equipment was not only technically superior, but available in quantities that made German losses irreplaceable, while American losses were merely temporary setbacks. As December turned to January and the German offensive collapsed, Kowalski's Jackson would continue to demonstrate the effectiveness of American tank destroyer doctrine. His crew would be credited with the destruction of 14 German tanks, 23 armored vehicles, and numerous soft targets throughout the remainder of the Ardennes campaign. But their most significant contribution was not measured in destroyed equipment, but in the tactical innovations that American forces would carry forward into the final campaigns of the war. The evolution of American tank destroyer tactics during the Battle of the Bulge represented a microcosm of the broader American approach to military innovation. Unlike European armies bound by centuries of military tradition, American forces demonstrated a willingness to abandon proven methods in favor of techniques that proved more effective under actual combat conditions. The pattern disruption technique, pioneered by gunners like Kowalski, would be refined and systematized, eventually becoming standard doctrine for American anti-tank operations. The German column that Kowalski destroyed represented more than 600 tons of steel, aluminum, and strategic materials that German industry could not replace. Each Panzer Roman IV required 25 tons of steel, 2 tons of aluminum, and 1.5 tons of copper, materials that were increasingly difficult for German industry to obtain as Allied bombing disrupted transportation networks and occupied territories were liberated. The Panther tanks each contained 45 tons of strategic materials, including rare earth elements essential for optical equipment and fire control systems. The economic dimension of tank warfare revealed the fundamental asymmetry between American and German industrial capacity. German forces operated under resource constraints that forced them to husband equipment and avoid unnecessary losses, while American forces could afford to trade material for tactical advantage. This economic reality influenced tactical decisions at every level, allowing American commanders to authorize aggressive operations that German commanders would consider wastefully expensive. The sound of Kowalski's 90 gun had become the sound of American industrial democracy in action, the embodiment of a society that could mobilize its entire productive capacity in service of military objectives. Each round that struck German armor represented not just individual tactical skill, but the collective effort of hundreds of thousands of American workers in factories, mines, and transportation networks stretching across an entire continent. The tungsten that penetrated German armor came from mines in Nevada, the steel from furnaces in Pennsylvania, the explosives from chemical plants in Delaware. This industrial dimension of American warfare represented something unprecedented in military history: the complete mobilization of an industrial society for military purposes without the economic disruption that had crippled European belligerents in previous conflicts. American tank destroyers carried more high-quality ammunition into battle than German tank crews would see in their entire combat careers, while American production lines continued to increase output even as the war reached its climax. The tactical radio in Kowalski's Jackson represented another dimension of American technological superiority that German forces struggled to counter. American tank destroyers could coordinate their fire with artillery, air support, and adjacent units in real time, creating combined arms effectiveness that multiplied the impact of individual engagements. German forces, operating with limited radio equipment and increasingly disrupted communication networks, found themselves fighting isolated engagements against opponents who could concentrate support from multiple sources. American communication technology, developed through collaboration between military and civilian electronics manufacturers, provided American forces with information superiority that proved as valuable as firepower superiority. Tank destroyer crews could receive intelligence updates, coordinate with adjacent units, and call for support with a speed and accuracy that German forces could rarely match. This technological advantage was particularly pronounced in the fluid combat conditions of the Ardennes, where rapid changes in tactical situations required immediate communication between widely dispersed units. As winter deepened and German resistance collapsed, the psychological impact of engagements like Kowalski's began to reshape German tactical doctrine. Panzer crews who had once advanced with confidence now approached American positions with the knowledge that individual enemy guns could destroy entire formations. The mathematical certainty of German defeat, apparent to objective observers since American entry into the war, had finally become apparent to German soldiers who found themselves outgunned, outnumbered, and facing opponents whose material resources seemed unlimited. The transformation of German tactical psychology during the final months of the war represented the ultimate victory of American industrial democracy over European military tradition. German forces, no matter how skillfully led or bravely fought, could not overcome the fundamental reality that American society could produce war materials faster than German forces could destroy them. The 90 rounds that Kowalski fired represented the physical manifestation of American productive capacity applied to military purposes. In the quiet that followed the destruction of the German column, Kowalski performed the routine maintenance that kept his Jackson operational, cleaning the gun barrel, checking the recoil mechanism, inventorying remaining ammunition. These mundane tasks represented the unglamorous reality of mechanized warfare. Victory achieved through the intersection of individual skill, superior equipment, and logistical systems that could maintain complex machinery under the most demanding conditions. American military maintenance doctrine, developed through extensive experience with mechanized equipment in civilian applications, provided American forces with a decisive advantage in sustained operations. German forces, operating with increasingly limited spare parts and fuel, found their equipment effectiveness declining throughout extended campaigns. American forces, supported by comprehensive logistics networks, could maintain their equipment at peak efficiency even during intensive combat operations. The frozen ground around Kowalski's position was littered with the brass cases of expended 90mm rounds, each one a testament to American manufacturing capacity and tactical effectiveness. These empty cases would be collected, returned to American facilities, and reprocessed into new ammunition with an efficiency that German observers would have found impossible to believe. The circular flow of materials from American factories to European battlefields and back to American recycling centers represented the logical conclusion of industrial warfare. This industrial cycle embodied the essential American approach to military conflict, the application of systematic, large-scale production methods to military requirements. Where European military traditions emphasized the heroic individual or the perfectly trained unit, American military doctrine recognized that victory in modern warfare required the mobilization of entire societies and their productive capacities. As news of Kowalski's achievements spread through American tank destroyer units, his unconventional firing pattern became known as the Kowalski method, a technique that would be taught to tank destroyer gunners for the remainder of the war. The method emphasized psychological impact over sequential target engagement, using unexpected firing patterns to maximize confusion in enemy formations. American tank destroyer schools would codify the technique, incorporating it into official doctrine that recognized individual initiative as a force multiplier in mechanized combat. The institutionalization of Kowalski's tactical innovation represented the democratic military principle that effective techniques, regardless of their origin, should be adopted and disseminated throughout the force structure. This contrasted sharply with German military culture, which maintained rigid hierarchical structures that often prevented tactical innovations from reaching the units that could benefit from them. The German tanks burning in the valley below represented more than tactical victory. They embodied the triumph of democratic industrial society over authoritarian military tradition. Each destroyed Panzer had required months of production time, specialized materials, and skilled labor that German society could no longer provide in sufficient quantities. The speed with which American industry could replace Kowalski's Jackson, should it be destroyed, exceeded the rate at which German forces could inflict such losses across the entire Western Front. This industrial reality had profound strategic implications that extended beyond immediate tactical situations. German military planners, recognizing that they could not match American production capacity, had gambled on achieving decisive tactical victories that would force political solutions before American industrial superiority could determine the war's outcome. The failure of operations like the Ardennes offensive demonstrated that tactical excellence could not overcome fundamental disparities in productive capacity. In the broader context of World War II, Kowalski's engagement represented a microcosm of the conflict between democratic and authoritarian approaches to warfare. American forces, empowered to make tactical decisions based on immediate battlefield conditions, consistently outperformed German forces bound by rigid doctrinal requirements. The individual initiative that allowed Kowalski to violate established doctrine in favor of battlefield effectiveness embodied the democratic principle that distributed decision-making authority produced better results than centralized command structures. The philosophical implications of this tactical success extended beyond military affairs to encompass broader questions about the relationship between individual freedom and collective effectiveness. American military success resulted not from superior discipline or martial tradition, but from a military culture that empowered individual soldiers to make decisions based on their assessment of immediate tactical requirements. The M-36 Jackson that Kowalski commanded would survive the war, eventually being shipped back to American facilities for refurbishment and potential use in future conflicts. The tank destroyer doctrine that his actions helped refine would influence American armored tactics for decades, providing tactical principles that would prove relevant in conflicts from Korea to Vietnam. But the most enduring legacy of that December morning in the Ardennes was the demonstration that individual American soldiers, equipped with superior American equipment and empowered by democratic military culture, could achieve tactical results that exceeded the theoretical capabilities of their weapons systems. This legacy would prove particularly relevant in the Cold War period, when American forces would face opponents whose equipment often matched or exceeded American technical specifications. The tactical innovations developed by soldiers like Kowalski provided American forces with operational advantages that transcended mere equipment comparisons, demonstrating that military effectiveness resulted from the combination of individual initiative, superior logistics, and democratic military culture. Today, the battlefield where Kowalski destroyed the German column has returned to peaceful Belgian countryside. The scattered remains of German tanks have long since been removed, recycled into peaceful purposes that would have seemed impossible during those violent December days. But the tactical principles that Kowalski demonstrated, the importance of individual initiative, the value of unconventional thinking, and the decisive impact of superior industrial capacity, remain relevant to contemporary military operations. Modern American military doctrine continues to emphasize the tactical flexibility and individual initiative that Kowalski embodied, recognizing that complex military situations often require innovative solutions that cannot be anticipated by established doctrine. The democratic military culture that empowered a single tank destroyer gunner to violate established procedures in favor of battlefield effectiveness provides a template for military organizations that must operate in unpredictable environments against adaptive opponents. In the end, the sound of Kowalski's 90 gun echoing across the frozen Ardennes represented something more profound than tactical success or individual heroism. It was the sound of democratic industrial society asserting its superiority over authoritarian military tradition, the sound of individual American initiative multiplied by collective American productive capacity. Each round that struck German armor carried the weight of American factories, American mines, American transportation networks, and American workers united in common purpose. It was the sound of a free society defending its values through the application of democratic principles to military necessity, demonstrating that individual freedom and collective effectiveness were not contradictory but complementary aspects of a military system that derived its strength from the society it served. The echoes of that sound would reverberate through the remaining months of World War II and beyond, reminding both allies and adversaries that American military power rested not merely on technical superiority or numerical advantage, but on the fundamental democratic principle that individual Americans, when properly equipped and empowered, could achieve results that exceeded the theoretical limits of their weapons and organizations. In a war that would ultimately be decided by industrial capacity and tactical innovation, the unauthorized firing pattern of a single tank destroyer gunner had demonstrated the decisive advantage of a military system that trusted its individual soldiers to make the right decisions when the stakes were highest.